Hi, I'm Bill Sanford with Lakeland PBS, and I'm your host for this very special edition of Lakeland Currents. Coming up, we'll provide you with information on the financial resources available for small businesses to help you through these very challenging times. Many of the federal programs available now appear as loans on the surface, but you need to know that a large portion of these loans can be forgiven if your business follows the federal program guidelines. So stay tuned.
Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for North Central Minnesota. Production funding for Lakeland Currents is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org. Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is sponsored by Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Online at nisswatax.com.
Joining us is Dave Hengel, Executive Director of Greater Bemidji, and Ryan Welle, Vice President of First National Bank in Bemidji. Welcome, guys. We've got a lot to cover, a lot of good information here. So I'm just going to start right out, and I'll ask Dave to give us a little bit of information about the Paycheck Protection Program, and then Ryan, maybe you can talk through the details of how folks can apply for that.
So the Paycheck Protection Program is, folks probably heard about Congress passing a big stimulus bill that not only helped individuals, but it also helped small businesses as well. And the Paycheck Protection Program through the SBA is that response by Congress to small businesses. And so that is a program that runs through the banks. And so I'm going to encourage Brian to kind of talk about details, but it is one that is a broader eligibility and, again, a response by the federal government to help small businesses.
Yeah, so as Dave alluded to, the Payroll Protection Program, as it was passed a few weeks ago through the legislative process, the application process opened up for all eligible borrowers last Friday. And in terms of the people that are eligible to apply for that loan, it's pretty much anyone. They expanded the guidelines in terms of who qualifies for these loans. It includes nonprofits, it includes tribal entities, independent contractors, sole proprietors, and basically any business with less than 500 employees. I will preface some of this, however, that the rules, since it has been applied, the administration of the loan itself has been left up to the Treasury and the SBA to determine. And the rules and the guidelines that we've been receiving since it was signed into law are constantly changing. And so there may be some adjustments to some of those eligible borrowers as we kind of move along, but at this point in time, that's what we know. Since the window opened, pretty much all banks that are SBA certified, and even those banks that were not previously SBA certified lenders, have ways of getting their borrowers submitted into the program itself. In total, there's $350 billion of monies that was allocated for the program itself. All of it is going to be dispersed through banks. And as far as we know right now, there's not a lot of great information out there, but it looks to be that it's somewhere between 200 to 300,000 applications have been submitted through the SBA portal. A lot of those loans have not been funded, however, meaning that people have applied their application, they've provided all the appropriate documentation that's required for receiving the loans, but the banks haven't been able to actually provide the loans or get the money to the businesses themselves, again, because we're still waiting on specific guidance and clearance from the SBA and the Treasury in terms of how we're supposed to do that. And a key component of this payroll protection program and why it's becoming so popular is it's all based off of payroll. So if you're looking at what a person's payroll is today at the time of application and what it looks like 8 weeks after receiving the loan funds, and if there's no change in that payroll or reduction in the amount that you're paying your employees, the loan can be 100% forgiven. And so it's a huge benefit. The concept and the intent is perfect. Because it's desperately needed in our communities. But a challenge where the banks are is real responsibility to our borrowers, that if we do something without 100% assurances from the SBA in terms of that forgiveness component of it, we put that forgiveness in jeopardy. And in times like this, that is something that most banks don't feel comfortable with, that sort of a risk. So there is still kind of a glitch in the system as it relates to that funding mechanism. We got guidance from the SBA late yesterday afternoon in terms of loan documentation that we can utilize. But even that is still kind of changing and evolving, and it's far from perfect.
Bill, if I could add to that, if I could.
Okay.
So Ryan mentioned something that I think is important because I've gotten phone calls from communities throughout northern Minnesota, some of which don't have access to an SBA certified bank. And most everything with the PPP has been run through SBA certified banks. Ryan mentioned that I think the SBA is reaching out to recertify or certify banks that hadn't previously been certified, as well as other organizations. So just if you're in a community that doesn't have a SBA certified bank, keep checking in and see if your bank's been certified, because I think that's an important thing. And a lot of small businesses out there are feeling they don't know where to turn. And so just keep an eye on that as time goes on here.
And again, as far as details, Ryan, it sounds like everybody's kind of scratching their head trying to figure out the details of how this will be administered. But from what I understand, the part of the loan that would be potentially forgivable, is that what, 2.5 months payroll? Is that correct? Or
yeah, so the technical language in terms of, first of all, how much of a loan do you qualify for? So you would start with your payroll file, and there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but keeping it as simple as possible. We're assuming the business was been established and has been around for a few years, and so they submitted a W-2 to the IRS of all their employees at the end of 2019. So each of those employees then could go file their tax returns. You could use just that number, and you would divide that by 12, where you get an average monthly payroll number, and then you would times that by 2.5%. The 2.5%, the technical term is 2 times your payroll plus an additional 25% to be used for your rent, utilities, mortgage interest, or other qualified expenses. And in terms of that, determines what your maximum loan amount is. So payroll times 2.5%, that's your maximum loan amount. And in terms of what you can use those proceeds for, it is for all those things that I just mentioned in addition to payroll. Mm-hmm. And then once you receive the funds, based on the information we received yesterday, from the time that you have received your funds, you have 8 weeks to essentially maintain the payroll that you have. At the end of that 8 weeks, you're going to be asked to supply all that same payroll information to the banks again. And we're anticipating that we're going to have to submit that to the SBA. And again, assuming that there's no change in the payroll number at the end of the 8-week period in comparison to what we provided in determining the maximum loan amount, the loan would be essentially 100% forgiven.
Wow, that would be awesome. So are there closing costs involved for a business that applies for this, or nothing at all?
There are no costs directly to the borrower. And part of the stipulations is banks were not allowed to impose any fees. In addition to that, any loan that is not forgiven, so in an unfortunate event that somebody gets a loan, and think of some of your local bars and restaurants, for example. This is a good example in the sense that if they got a loan today, they have 8 weeks to hire these people back. Well, unfortunately, under the current guidance from the governor that we received here in the state of Minnesota, a lot of those restaurants won't be able to be reopening back up in 8 weeks. They're still going to be under the stay-at-home clause, and so that's a huge issue that we have specifically as it relates to the state of Minnesota. And so if they took a loan and then use those proceeds in 8 weeks' time because they weren't able to rehire all these people, they're going to be responsible for the repayment of those loans. The loan rate itself, it's fixed at 1%, which is obviously a very favorable interest rate. However, it's over a 2-year period of time. So 2 years is not a very long amortization when you're talking about 2.5 times a payroll. If you have 100 employees, you're talking about several $100,000 that has to be paid back in 2 years when you have still no revenue coming in. So people that are applying and trying to figure this out, that's just something that your banks need to be making you aware of, and something they have to keep in the back of their mind.
Mm-hmm. It still sounds like a real opportunity for folks, though, if you're in a position that you can keep these folks on, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. And even in the loan forgiveness component of it, I think is it's still changing. And again, the 8-week period of time, that's stemming from the information we received yesterday afternoon. I can tell you our bank, as well as I think a lot of other banks in the state of Minnesota and other states that are under more of a stay at home. So think of kind of New York and California, and these other larger ones are going to be pushing really hard on that 8-week period of time and pushing it hopefully to June 30th, which, going back to the original interim final rule from the SBA, was the time period that was allotted for trying to hire these people back. And all of a sudden that changes the game for a lot of people too. Just allows them more time to responsibly bring these people back to work, not only from an economic standpoint, but also a health and safety standpoint too.
Mm-hmm. So really the only way a business could get in trouble with this is if they did take the loan and spent some of the money and weren't able to get back up to that required level of employment for their people, they would have to pay those funds back, right?
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Other than that, though, it looks like an awesome opportunity. Dave, anything else to add on the?
Just my comment would be is we have several banks, of course, that are accepting PPP loan applications, and many of them, and Ryan's bank, I'm sure, is one of them, have received hundreds of applications within a day or two. And so my encouragement to small businesses and viewers out there: be patient with your banks, be patient with the program. When we're talking about hundreds of thousands of applications going to the federal government at the same time, it's not going to go as quickly as everybody had hoped. So just be patient and realize your banks are working hard for you. And as programs change and as the requirements change, as Ryan's described, it makes it even harder. And so just like I said, I'd encourage businesses to be patient on this.
Yeah. So again, the place to go is your local bank and talk to them about this. And if they don't know anything about it, find one that does, right?
Yep. And at risk at sounding a little too community bankish, don't bother going to a Wells Fargo. If you bank with a Wells Fargo, they are no longer accepting these applications as of this past Monday. So no disparagement against them. They just kind of ran into a regulatory capital issue in terms of how many PPP loans that they could issue. And they reached that capacity last Monday, which was 10 billion. So to Dave's point, in terms of how quickly the funds are going, the popularity of the program, that's certainly a piece of information to know.
Bill, I just add one more thing if I could. Ryan talked a little bit about timelines, and I think there's something to that specifically for northern Minnesota, your viewing area, Bill, which is we're hearing from Sanford Health here that our peak is currently modeled to be about mid-June. That is not the case for much of the rest of the country, and certainly even in our state. And so there's some potential here that the impact could be even greater on northern Minnesota tourist communities. And so I'm glad the banks are battling with the SBA and encouraging them to be more flexible on the timeline on this, because this could linger in northern Minnesota for sure.
Yeah, if it ends up going that late, it's going to be a big problem, that's for sure. It's really going to be a big impact on the businesses. So, well, thanks so much for that great information on the PPP program. There's another SBA program called the Disaster Economic Injury Loan. Dave, do you want to give an overview of what that is?
Sure can.
And then maybe
so the SBA Disaster Economic Injury Loan is the same program that the federal government always has for disasters. So whether it's a flood or a tornado or something like that, when there's a disaster declared, this program becomes available. And so it's available to businesses. You can apply online through the SBA. It is a 30-year loan at 3.75%. Interest over 30 years. That length of term is really important, though, because you can really spread out the impact on this, of the coronavirus crisis that we're in right now. There is some conversation about that interest rate coming down as part of Congress's stimulus package. I don't know if that's been officially approved yet or not. Ryan might know. But the reason we encourage people to get online and apply for that as well is that some of the other programs that maybe we'll talk about today also require you to apply for SBA Disaster Loan Program. The reason they do that, and again, is in part because some of the funding we're getting from either locals or regions or even the state of Minnesota is considered bridge funding. It's an attempt to make sure that businesses get from now to when they get the federal resources that are being shown as available or promised by the federal government. And so that's why we strongly encourage people to get online, apply for that SBA Disaster Loan Program. Is my understanding there's no reason you can't apply for both, provided you're not using the funds for the exact same thing. So don't feel like you can't apply for the disaster loan because you've applied to the bank for the PPP program.
Ryan, do you have anything to add to that? Isn't there I heard that there was for that disaster economic injury loan, there was a provision that allowed you to apply for up to $10,000 as an advance. And from what I understood, even if you rejected the loan and got the advance didn't have to be paid back. Ryan, can you add some insight on that? What do you know about that?
Yeah, so the advance component of the EIDL, you can request it at the time of application. It's supposed to be a pretty timely response in terms of getting it back. And, the SBA determines, they do their own underwriting and all this, but assuming that it's for qualified reasons and for an economic disaster purposes, it can fully be forgiven, or it doesn't have to be repaid.
Okay. So maybe that's another reason to consider that disaster economic injury loan as a way to get some capital quickly to help you operate.
Just as a heads up as well, many of the small businesses jumped online and applied online right away, even before the SBA PPP program came out, and they were having some issues with the website at the SBA because of the enormity of number of people that accessed right away. My understanding that's been fixed, and they've worked on the system, and you should be able to jump on and fill that out. I will say, as you can expect, as we said with the PPP, the demands are high nationwide, and so I was speaking to one business who said he was trying to make a phone call to them at the SBA just to ask a few questions about it, and he was 945th on the queue. And so literally 14 hours out. And so just, again, I stress again to be patient, but keep plugging away on that application.
So again, just to be clear, that's an online application. That's not go to your banker. That you do that online. And I just want to point out too that Dave's organization, Greater Bemidji, has an awesome website. If you go to their homepage at greaterbemidji.com, they have a link to COVID resources, and that COVID resources page has got just a wonderful array of information, lots of links. There's a link to apply for that disaster economic injury loan. There's information about the Paycheck protection, just all kinds of programs, lots of great information. Thanks, Dave, so much for having that resource available to folks. That's
You're welcome, Bill. And
you know,
we put it up almost was a little leery of putting it all up because, quite honestly, there is a concern I have of people getting overwhelmed. And in that sense, I just encourage people, the links are there and understand it, but don't feel like you're ever going to fully understand these programs to the extent that Ryan does and the bankers that you work with do, because they are changing, they are rapidly moving, they're unique and individualistic, and so I just encourage people not to feel like they have to understand all those links or programs.
Absolutely. There's some state programs too that Dave made me aware of. Minnesota has a deed small business emergency loan program. Dave, do you want to give us a little overview on that?
I'll give you an overview. So actually, the state of Minnesota, about a week and a half ago, created what they call their small business disaster loan program. And actually, it's run through certified lenders throughout the state, of which Greater Bemidji is one. If you go to their website, you can see the certified lenders, but they're primarily nonprofits who act on behalf of the state to review loan apps. But I'd like, first in terms of terms, just to give people a sense of what they're eligible for. Small businesses are eligible for up to $35,000. It's a 0% loan, no payments for the first 6 months. There is some potential after 2 years, if you're still in business, that half that loan could be forgiven. And so that'd be one of those programs that does that. The state, however, does see this as a bridge program, and so that's one of the ones where you'll be asked to be in the process of applying for that SBA disaster loan program. And so, just as an awareness of that, the one thing I want to point out about the deed funds is that they have a relatively narrow definition of what those funds, who's eligible, and it is. The way I put it is that anybody who was forced to close down by the governor's first executive orders are eligible for these funds. And so generally, restaurants, bars, pubs, salons, recreational facilities, workout facilities, fitness centers, that type of thing, are the ones who, if you remember, were forced to close down first by the governor, the governor's executive orders. Now, we all know that a lot of businesses were indirectly impacted by those closures, but they won't be eligible for this fund at this point. And so if you're interested, if you are a restaurant, or if you do fit those criteria, or if you wonder if you're eligible, if you're kind of in the fuzzy zone of eligibility, by all means contact us. We'd be happy to share whether you're eligible, secondly, what we think you can receive. The good news on the deed funds is the state has moved very quickly. I will give them a great deal of credit. At the State Department of Employment and Economic Development, we've had several businesses in Bemidji already receive checks in support to get them that bridge loan. And so we can move quickly to support those who are eligible. So I just encourage people to reach out to us. If we aren't your certified lender, I'll make sure you get connected to the one that is.
So Dave, that does not run through banks. It runs through organizations like yours, right?
And so it does run through us, but I'll tell you, I've strongly encouraged whether a program runs through a bank or not. So like the deed funds that I just mentioned, or the SBA disaster loan program, if you are applying as a business, please let your banker know that. I mean, it's important that they are aware of what programs are out there, because sometimes, by the way, it's not a perfect fit for your situation as a small business, even if you're eligible. And your banker can help you think through what are the programs that are best fits for your needs right now.
What kind of turnaround do they have on this thing from the point where somebody's going to apply until they actually see some
dangerous.
Cash,
So, as you know, it gets probably slower as it goes along because more applications come in. I will tell you, we are running about 10 days.
Okay, well, that's
so it goes through a review process here at Greater Bemidji that usually takes a day or two. We send it down to the state. We usually get approval relatively quickly from them, and then we got to, of course, get the funds sent up here and close on the loan as part of that. And so 10 days were the first ones, I'll say that.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Anything else to add on the deed?
No, again, I think they're getting an enormous amount of applications. And so by all means, if you're wondering, don't fill out an application. Don't do all the things that you might find online without talking to a certified lender first. If you don't know who to go to, talk to me. I'm happy to share who one, if you're eligible, but secondly, who you should be working with.
We've got one other program to talk about here, and that is the Department of Human Services has a child care grant program, and Dave, tell me a little bit about that. I wasn't aware of that at all.
And so new that they haven't come up with the criteria yet, nor the policies, nor the application, at least that we've seen. The reason I encourage you to share that is we, of course, have been reached, many small child care centers have reached out to us, in-home daycare providers and child care centers that are deeply affected by this. Many of them have reached out to us. They're not eligible for the state funds, the deed funds that we just talked about, but the state realized that and have created this child care grant program. We will be tracking that at Greater Bemidji. If you go to our website, as Bill talked about, we will keep updates on that. And if you are a child care center, you're going to want to keep an eye on that child care grant program. It's supposed to be released very soon.
Okay. So basically, the word grant is in the title. So it basically would be, here's some money to help.
We understand at this point, but again, no policies or guidelines that we're aware of are out yet.
What is the application like, Ryan? How complex is it? What kind of workload, what kind of time are the people going to have to invest in putting this together? Can you maybe go over the pieces that need to be provided to apply for that funding?
Yeah, great question. So it almost seems to be, when they first came out of this, I guess the idea of it being very simple, very easy, and very quick. Typically we're talking about federal government programs as are rarely things accomplished. In this particular case, I would agree with it. It's a 2-page application. Most of it is a yes or no question. In addition to the application, you need to provide verification of the payroll records. So again, going looking at the full submittal of the W-2s at the end of last year, or payroll summaries for the first quarter of this year, or depending on how long the business has been established for, it can be as simple as just, what the payroll has been for the last couple of months. So in terms of the documentation that's required, it's pretty minimal. And in terms of the bank's responsibility in all of this, we're not being tasked at this point in time with the full underwriting of those applications. It's purely just certification and verifying the amounts that the borrower is utilizing are accurate. So from that, the bank then takes it. The bank process is a little bit more cumbersome. We have to then upload it into the SBA. It's called an E-Tran portal. There's a few more additional questions in there that is not on the application that we have to collect on our own. And so the bank is likely to come back and just ask for some additional information from the borrower as they're completing that E-Tran portal process. And then after that, that's unfortunately still kind of the unknown in terms of the documentation required for the loan forgiveness component of it. Our anticipation, again, when you go to supply or submit for the loan forgiveness, is going to be all of those same payroll records once again.
Well, anything else to add, guys? I think we've covered a lot of ground here, a lot of good information for folks.
Well, let me, I'll just share a few things that I've been, of course, talking to businesses about over the last few weeks, and I've called it my do not list a little bit, which is, first off, I kind of hinted to it earlier, don't feel like you need to understand these programs intimately. It's like trying to diagnose yourself online through WebMD or whatever. Don't do that. It is impossible. It will drive you crazy, and it'll also frustrate the heck out of you. So don't do that. Don't try and fully understand the programs. Trust those like your bankers and economic development folks to help you steer you in the right direction. The other thing I'm going to encourage is that don't not apply. I have had several businesses that are prideful. And that's a good thing in a sense that they don't feel like they need help, that they can figure this out. And I would rather have you apply and have that available to you than not. And the reason I say that is this is a situation that you couldn't have planned for. There's not a single business that could have planned for this and projected this out. And so just in this circumstance, I'd encourage you to apply if you're eligible. Please apply. And then the last thing I'll just say is don't hop online and get an application and start filling it out without realizing whether you're eligible or not. And the way to do that is, one, talk to your banker, and then secondly, talk to the organizations like mine that will help you identify if you're eligible, because I hate for you to be out there wasting time on an application you're not eligible for. And all it's going to do is make you frustrated. And so last thing I'll say is be patient. Be patient, particularly with those who are trying to help you. And that includes your bank, but also includes the organizations at the state level, the federal level, and at the local levels that are trying to help you as well.
Again, I mean, part of the program, it's a first come, first serve. So, I mean, we got to make sure that those that are in need, we got to respond quickly. And now we just got to try and get the money into their hands as fast as possible. So we'll continue to do that and certainly be responsive. And I think all banks, to encourage anyone that's watching this, just have the conversation with your banker and they'll guide you along. This is the whole purpose of banks, to be there to support people when times get tough such as this. So reach out, we're here to help.
All right, and again, I just want to point out the Greater Bemidji website, greaterbemidji.com. There is a COVID resources page, and it has links to everything we've talked about here, just a ton of good information. Again, I want to thank you guys. Really appreciate your help, and thanks for joining me on the show.